Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what you think medieval sleep was like in one word: miserable, peaceful, crowded, or dangerous. Now let us step into a world with no electric light, no glowing screens, and no modern noise floor, because the first surprise is that medieval people often slept better than you think, just not in the way you expect. Most modern sleep is built around one long, uninterrupted block, as if the night is a tunnel you pass through. In many medieval communities, that is not the default. Nights can be segmented. People go to bed earlier, wake for a quiet interval, then return to sleep. That gap is not automatically insomnia. It can be a normal second wind shaped by darkness, digestion, and household duties. You wake, the house is still, and you do what fits the moment. Add fuel to the fire, say a prayer, check animals, or simply rest in the dark until sleep returns. The master clock is the sun. When the day ends, most light becomes expensive, risky, or both. Candles and oil lamps exist, but they cost money and they can burn down a home. A hearth gives light, but it also eats fuel and demands attention. So behavior shifts. Evening becomes quieter, lower stimulation, fewer late decisions, fewer bright cues that tell your brain to stay awake. That alone changes sleep quality. Modern nights are visually loud. Medieval nights are visually dim, and the nervous system often follows. Then you notice that the bed is not just furniture. It is insulation, privacy, and status. For wealthier households, a bed frame lifts you off a cold floor and away from drafts. For many, the bed is also one of the most valuable objects in the home, built to last and meant to be seen. Curtains, canopies, and heavy textiles are not decorations. They are microclimate tools that trap warmth and cut airflow. A good bed is a private weather system. What they sleep on depends on class, region, and season, but the principle stays the same: create loft, reduce cold contact, manage moisture. Straw mattresses are common, and they can be surprisingly comfortable when they are fresh, packed evenly, and kept dry, but they require maintenance and they can invite pests. Wool bedding insulates even when slightly damp and stays warm in a way plant fibers do not. Feather beds exist for those who can afford them, and they feel luxurious, but they can also trap heat and require careful airing. Comfort is possible, but it is never passive. Bedding is managed like food stores. It is fluffed, aired, beaten, and rotated. Warmth is engineered through layers. People sleep in night clothes, but also in caps, socks, and linen that keep skin from direct contact with rougher wool. They use multiple blankets, sometimes fur, sometimes heavy woven covers, and they place the most insulating layers where heat escapes fastest. In winter, bed curtains matter more than many modern heaters, because cutting a draft can feel like raising the temperature. Even the location of the bed within the room is a design choice: away from the door line, away from the worst leaks, closer to the warmer interior wall. By the end of this first stretch, the picture is clearer. Medieval sleep is not automatically worse. It is often darker, calmer, and more aligned with natural rhythms, while using surprisingly practical technology in cloth, layering, and routine. But the next truth is more complicated, because comfort is not the only goal at night. Safety and shared living shape sleep just as much as blankets do, and that is where the modern imagination usually gets it wrong. The next surprise is how normal shared sleeping is, and why it can improve sleep rather than ruin it. People share beds and rooms for reasons that are practical before they are sentimental. Heat is easier to keep when bodies are close, and in a drafty building, warmth is a resource you protect. Space is also expensive. A home is not built for private bedrooms the way many modern homes are. But beyond poverty, there is a cultural assumption that sleep is social. Children sleep near adults. Apprentices sleep near masters. Travelers sleep where there is room. Privacy exists, but it is negotiated through curtains, corners, and etiquette rather than separate rooms. That shared arrangement also supports nighttime security. A medieval house is not sealed like a modern one. Doors and shutters exist, but locks can be simple, windows can be small gaps, and fire is both tool and threat. People sleep lighter when the household is responsible for its own safety. Dogs are early warning systems. Latches and bars are checked. Tools and valuables are placed where they can be reached fast. Neighborhood habits matter too. In some towns, night watch routines and curfews change how safe the street feels, and that changes how deeply people can rest. Many households sleep in a way that keeps someone capable of waking quickly, not from anxiety alone, but from practiced responsibility. This is where the segmented night makes even more sense. The wakeful interval between sleeps is a time when the household can quietly reset the environment. If the fire fades, it is stoked. If the door bar feels loose, it is adjusted. If a baby stirs, someone responds without turning the whole house into a bright, noisy event. The night is not one uninterrupted performance. It is a rhythm of settling, waking, and settling again. Modern people often fight wakefulness with frustration. Medieval people often accept it and move within it. Light at night exists, but it is controlled. Rushlights, small candles, and guarded embers provide just enough visibility without turning the night into day. That restraint lowers stimulation. You do not scroll, you do not flood your eyes with bright blue light, you do not keep your brain in a constant alert state. When you wake, the darkness stays friendly rather than hostile, and the return to sleep is easier. Fire discipline is part of this. You do not leave flames unattended. You bank coals. You respect smoke. The rules of the house protect the house, and that protection supports rest. Night is also a mental space shaped by religion and meaning. People interpret dreams, pray before bed, and frame the night as a time when spiritual dangers and spiritual comforts feel closer. That can increase anxiety in some contexts, but it can also calm the mind through routine and familiarity. A repeated bedtime pattern is a form of early sleep hygiene. It tells the body that the day is done and the night has a purpose. But this is where the story needs a reversal, because none of this changes the fact that medieval sleep can become a battlefield. The same crowded warmth that helps can also spread parasites. The same hearth that comforts can fill the room with smoke. The same thin walls that keep a community close can also keep every sound alive. And once you see what fleas, lice, and illness can do to a night, you understand that sleeping well was not guaranteed. It was earned, fought for, and constantly defended. The hardest truth is that medieval sleep quality rises and falls on enemies that modern bedrooms rarely face. Fleas and lice can turn a warm bed into a trap. Smoke can irritate eyes and lungs. Noise travels easily in buildings with thin partitions and shared spaces. Illness can arrive without warning and change the entire household schedule. This is the midpoint reversal. Medieval people could sleep deeply and well, but they could also suffer nights that feel unbearable, and the difference is often not wealth alone. It is maintenance, cleanliness, and routine. Parasite control is not guesswork. Households use practical methods that function as a medieval hygiene system. Bedding is aired outdoors when weather allows, because sunlight and moving air reduce moisture and make pests less comfortable. Straw stuffing is replaced or refreshed, not because people are picky, but because old bedding becomes a habitat. Wool blankets are beaten and brushed. Hair is combed carefully, and families learn to check seams and folds where insects hide. Washing exists, but it is labor and fuel. Heating water costs time and wood, so it is scheduled and prioritized. Boiling cloth and scalding vessels are not modern inventions, they are responses to obvious cause and effect. Herbs are used, but with realistic expectations. Strong-smelling plants can discourage some insects and make bedding feel cleaner, but they are not magic shields. The real control comes from drying, airing, replacing, and keeping the sleeping area from becoming damp and cluttered. Smoke can also play a role, not as a comfort, but as a deterrent in certain spaces, though too much smoke creates its own misery. Medieval households learn to balance these forces, because everything in the home is a trade. Warmth versus airflow, darkness versus safety, comfort versus pests. Noise management is another quiet skill. If you cannot build thick walls, you build habits. People place beds strategically, away from doors, away from the loudest work areas, and sometimes behind curtains that reduce drafts and soften sound. Household etiquette matters. Late-night movement is minimized. Conversations lower. Tools are not dropped. The town itself can become quieter after curfew in ways that surprise a modern listener, not because people are kinder, but because darkness limits activity. When the night becomes a social agreement rather than a personal preference, sleep can improve even in crowded conditions. Seasonal work reshapes rest in ways that look like a luxury but function like survival. During harvest, labor starts early and runs long, and sleep compresses. In winter, nights are longer, and people often spend more time in bed, not always sleeping the whole time, but resting, warming, and conserving energy. Naps appear in some contexts because the day is physically demanding and the night is not engineered for 8 straight hours. Flexible rest is not laziness. It is adaptation to light and labor. Illness changes everything. When someone is sick, the household reorganizes sleeping arrangements to provide care and reduce fear of spread. The sickbed becomes a center of attention, with warmth, fluids, and watchfulness. Sleep becomes lighter, interrupted, and communal. You learn that medieval sleep is not just about personal comfort. It is a household resource that shifts with crisis. Travel sleep reveals the essentials by stripping everything else away. In an inn, a barn, or a roadside shelter, the best sleep depends on dry ground, insulation under the body, and protection from wind. Travelers learn to prioritize a barrier between them and the floor, a cloak that blocks drafts, and a position that keeps valuables safe. Comfort becomes portable technique. Now the story is ready for its strongest payoff. After seeing both the advantages and the hardships, you can finally separate what medieval people got right from what we get wrong today, and build a clear routine that explains why their nights could be better than you think. Some of the best medieval sleep habits sound like modern advice, except they were not trends, they were necessities. Darkness was normal. Evening was low stimulation by default because light was limited and costly. That meant fewer late-night signals telling the brain to stay alert. Temperature was managed with layering, curtains, and shared heat instead of blasting a room hot and then exposing skin to drafts. The sleeping space was treated like a controlled environment, not an afterthought. Monasteries show how intentional rest can be even without luxury. Their schedules divide day and night with strict structure, and while the hours can be demanding, the principle is clear. Routine governs the body. Regular timing, predictable rituals, and reduced evening chaos help sleep arrive more reliably. Even outside monasteries, households often follow repeated patterns that function like sleep hygiene. A final meal at a consistent time, a prayer or quiet routine, a banked fire, secure doors, and a dark room that stays dark. This is where modern assumptions start to break down. We often imagine medieval misery as constant, as if everyone slept on bare boards in freezing rooms. Many did struggle, but many also built comfort from accessible materials. Straw can be soft when maintained. Wool can be warmer than modern blankets. A canopy and curtains can make a small space feel insulated and private. Shared sleeping can feel safer and warmer when the night outside is risky. Even the segmented night, which sounds strange to modern ears, can reduce anxiety around waking, because waking is not automatically failure. At the same time, it is important not to romanticize. Parasites were real, smoke could be harsh, illness was frightening, and privacy was limited. The reason medieval people could sleep better than you think is not because their lives were easy, but because their environment supported sleep in specific ways. Their nights were darker. Their routines were steadier. Their stimulation was lower. Their expectations were different. They did not demand perfect, uninterrupted sleep as proof of health. They worked with the night instead of fighting it. The outcome is a medieval sleep routine that makes sense even now, stripped of the hardships. Let darkness return in the evening. Lower light levels gradually instead of flooding your eyes until bedtime. Keep the room cool and use layers to stay warm, because stable temperature supports deeper sleep. Build a small ritual that signals safety and closure, like a quiet stretch, a consistent time, and a simple checklist that ends the day. If you wake in the night, treat it as a normal phase rather than a catastrophe, and keep the environment dim so sleep can return. Reduce noise through placement, soft barriers, and household agreement, because medieval people knew that silence is built, not wished for. So the real twist is not that medieval life was comfortable. It is that medieval nights often aligned with how human bodies are designed to rest. Darkness, routine, cooler air, and fewer artificial cues to stay awake. And that leaves one question that separates myth from reality. If you removed electric light from your life for 1 week, would your sleep improve because the night finally became night again, or would you discover just how much modern comfort has been compensating for habits that keep you awake?